I thought the storm just knocked out my power, until I got a strange text about downed power lines from a normal phone number. Minutes later, I heard footsteps coming from my basement. That's when I realized the blackout wasn't an accident. Someone had shut my power off on purpose, and they were already inside my house. It was a Monday night. I'd gotten off work around 8 and went straight home to jump online and game with a few of my friends. I'd gone through a divorce a few months earlier, so the house felt empty most nights. Gaming was basically how I kept myself distracted, and honestly, I didn't mind it. I knew a heavy thunderstorm was supposed to roll in overnight. There were even flash flood warnings, but around here those alerts pop up almost every time it rains, so nobody really takes them seriously. Around 11, while I was mid-game, a massive gust of wind slammed against the window beside me. The whole house rattled. I lifted one side of my headset and could hear rain pounding against the roof, the walls creaking under the pressure. I turned back toward my screen to tell my friends what was happening, when everything flickered. My monitor went black for a split second. The lights dimmed. Then everything shut off completely. My PC powered down. Every light in the house went dark. For a moment, I couldn't even see my hands in front of my face. I felt around my desk until I found my phone and turned on the flashlight. Annoyed, I headed downstairs and looked out the front window. It was hard to tell if the whole neighborhood had lost power. Rain was pouring so hard it blurred everything. Most houses were dark anyway since it was late. I sent a message in our group chat saying I was probably done for the night. Using my phone light, I went down to the basement and dug out an old battery pack I kept for emergencies. It wasn't powerful, but it could run a couple lamps. As I lifted it and turned toward the stairs, I thought I heard something behind me, maybe boxes shifting. But a strong gust of wind rattled the house at the same moment, so I brushed it off as storm noise. I carried the battery pack upstairs and plugged in a lamp in the living room. I hated sleeping when the power was out. Something about it always made me uneasy. So I opened the blinds, sat on the couch, and scrolled through videos using my mobile data. About an hour passed. Curious, I stepped outside onto the porch. The overhang blocked most of the rain, and I scanned the street. The storm was still raging, but across the road, I could clearly see lights on inside a couple houses. That confused me. If my power was out, why did they still have electricity? I checked outage maps on my phone, but there was nothing reported in my area. I went back inside. Less than a minute later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number saying there were downed power lines and that outages were expected. The message didn't have any company name, no official sender ID, just a normal phone number. It felt strange, but I shrugged it off and went back to the couch. A little while later, while listening to a video and watching the rain through the window, I heard something from the other side of the house. A creak, the unmistakable sound of a footstep on the basement stairs. I'd lived there long enough to recognize that noise. I stood up slowly and moved toward the hallway, keeping my phone light pointed ahead. The house was completely dark except for that small beam. When I turned the corner and shined the light down the hall, nothing was there, but the basement door was wide open. I knew I hadn't left it like that. I approached carefully and aimed the light down the stairs. I couldn't see anything, and there was no chance I was going down there in total darkness. I closed the door. That's when the feeling hit me. That deep, instinctive sense that something was wrong. I took a step away from the door, and suddenly heavy footsteps came charging up the basement stairs. The door shook violently. Without thinking, I threw my body against it, bracing it shut with all my weight. A second later, something slammed into the other side. Whoever it was tried to yank the door open. When they realized I was holding it shut, they started ramming into it. Shoulder hits, full force. The door didn't have a lock. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pulled my phone out and dialed 911. The moment the call connected, the pounding stopped. I heard fast footsteps retreating down the stairs. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys and ran to my car, driving to the other side of the street to watch the house from a distance. A few minutes later, police arrived and searched the home. No one was inside. They found the back door unlocked. That's how he'd gotten out. The most disturbing part came later. The text message I'd received about the power outage was confirmed to be fake, sent from a private phone number, not a utility company, which meant whoever broke into my house knew my phone number. He wasn't randomly targeting a house. He had shut off my power himself, probably hoping I'd go down into the basement to check the breaker box. The text was meant to keep me from getting suspicious. To this day, they never figured out who it was or what he wanted. And I still think about how close I came to walking straight into the dark basement that night. Next story. We thought we were completely alone in the forest. No nearby camps, no other hikers, just miles of trees and darkness. Then we heard voices deep in the woods. Not one voice, several. And when a stranger stepped out of the darkness and told us he was hiking alone, we realized someone was lying, because when we ran, we could hear more than one set of footsteps chasing us. I was going on a camping trip with my best friend. I'll call him Henry. We'd gone on a few camping trips before, but nothing too intense. Mostly local campgrounds, usually with other people nearby. We still considered ourselves beginners, but we felt confident enough to try something more adventurous. Real backcountry camping, deeper in the forest, somewhere quiet and scenic. We spent a few days researching and finally found a spot about 3 hours away. The trail required about a 4-hour hike into the woods, and there were only a couple of photos online from previous campers. It didn't look busy at all, which honestly sounded perfect to us. We packed for 3 days and drove out early that morning. At the end of an otherwise unused forest road, there was a small dirt clearing where you could park. No other cars were there. The trailhead looked old, like it had been used at one point, but hadn't been maintained in years. Parts of it were overgrown, and the ground looked weathered and uneven. It already felt like we were stepping into somewhere forgotten. Still, we started hiking. The trail slowly thinned out the deeper we went into the forest. By mid-afternoon, we finally reached the campsite. It was basically a small grassy clearing on top of a hill, overlooking miles of dense trees. It was quiet, isolated, and looked like no one had camped there in a very long time. No footprints, no trash, no signs of recent activity. We set up our tents and unpacked our gear. Henry took a little longer than I did, so while I waited, I walked toward the overlook to take in the view. That's when I noticed movement in the trees below us. At first, I thought it might be animals, but after focusing, I realized it looked like a group of people, maybe 4 or 5 figures moving through the forest together. They were hard to see through the branches and shadows, but their movement was definitely human. It surprised me. I didn't expect to see anyone else this far out. I called Henry over to show him, but by the time he got there, they were gone, completely swallowed by the trees. We shrugged it off and went back to relaxing. As the sun went down, we built a small campfire and sat around talking. For the first couple of hours, everything felt peaceful. Just the crackling fire, the quiet forest, and the occasional night sounds in the distance. Then we heard something else. Voices, faint at first, but unmistakable. Multiple voices talking somewhere deep in the trees. We couldn't understand what they were saying. We couldn't even tell what language it was. It sounded far away, but still close enough to make our skin crawl. We sat there silently, listening. The voices didn't move closer. They didn't fade away either. They just stayed, out there. And then suddenly, they stopped. Not gradually, not drifting away, just silence. A few seconds passed. Then we heard footsteps. One set, walking toward us. A moment later, a man stepped out of the darkness and into the glow of our campfire. He was tall, wearing a red baseball cap with long, wavy dark hair. He had a wide smile that immediately felt unnatural. He casually asked if we knew where the trail was, saying he'd been wandering for a while trying to find it. I pointed in the direction of the trail and told him where it was, but he didn't leave right away. So I asked him if the people we'd heard in the woods were with him. For just a split second, his expression changed. His smile dropped, almost like he'd been caught off guard. Then it snapped right back into place. He told us he didn't know what we were talking about. Said he was hiking alone and hadn't seen anyone else out there. That didn't sit right. He had come from the exact direction the voices were coming from. Henry and I both felt it. Something was wrong. The man smiled again, thanked us, and walked down the trail into the darkness. As soon as he disappeared, Henry and I looked at each other. We both agreed he had been lying. There was no way he hadn't noticed the group of people in the woods. The bigger question was why he was lying about it. We sat there for another 30 minutes, trying to make sense of it. The entire time, it felt like we were being watched. Every sound in the forest suddenly felt louder. Every shadow felt closer. Finally, Henry said quietly, "We should leave." I agreed. We quickly started packing our gear. The uneasy feeling kept growing. Just as we finished putting our backpacks on and stomped out the campfire, we heard a single crunch of leaves behind us. We both turned around. Without the firelight, the forest was pitch black. The silence felt heavy and unnatural. I slowly reached into my backpack and pulled out my flashlight. When I turned it on, my stomach dropped. Standing about 10 or 15 feet away was the same man with the red baseball cap. He was already staring straight at us, completely motionless. His face was blank, empty, until that same wide smile slowly spread across his face again. Panic hit instantly. I shut off the flashlight and both of us sprinted toward the trail. As we ran, we heard more footsteps behind us. Not just one person, multiple. Some sounded like they were crashing through the woods beside the trail, keeping pace with us in the darkness. We didn't look back. After what felt like forever, the footsteps slowly faded away. Eventually, it was just the two of us running through the dark forest. We reached the car, threw our bags inside, and drove away without stopping. Neither of us really knows what we encountered that night, who those people were, why they were out there, or what would have happened if we hadn't left when we did. We haven't been camping since, and honestly, I don't know if we ever will again. Next story. I thought the knocks on my hotel door were just someone in the wrong room. Then the front desk told me something that made my blood run cold. I was the only guest in the entire hotel. No one else was supposed to be here. And someone had been knocking on my door, twice. I went back to my room thinking it was just my imagination. That's when I saw him standing in the corner of my room, watching me in the dark. This happened in the spring of 2021. I was 24 at the time, living out of state while finishing college. Spring break came early that year, which meant I finally had the chance to drive home and see my family. It was about a 2-day drive, mostly empty highways and long stretches of nothing. I actually enjoy driving more than flying, so I left early Tuesday morning and made great time. I didn't plan the route carefully. I just knew roughly where I wanted to stop for the night. After nearly 10 hours on the road, around 8 in the evening, I pulled into a gas station and searched for the nearest hotel. I was deep in the middle of nowhere, but one showed up about 20 minutes away. The directions led me off the highway onto an old, narrow road with barely any street lights. There were no other cars. After a few minutes, I passed through a tiny, outdated town and reached a small, aging hotel at the end of the road. The parking lot was completely empty. Inside, the lobby lights were dim, almost unsettlingly dim. No TVs, no voices, no movement. I stood at the front desk for nearly a minute before a woman appeared from a back hallway, clearly startled to see me. She checked me in quickly and gave me a room at the very end of the hall. The room was small and outdated, but I was exhausted. I tossed my bag down, lay on the couch, and scrolled on my phone until I drifted off. I woke up suddenly to loud banging on my door. My heart jumped. I checked the clock, 11 p.m. I opened the door immediately. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no voices, just silence. I stood there confused for nearly half a minute, wondering if maybe someone had knocked on the wrong door. Eventually, I brushed it off, took a shower, set my alarm, and went to bed. Some time later, it happened again, even louder this time. I rushed to the door and opened it. Again, nothing. The hallway was dark and silent. That's when unease finally set in. Something didn't feel right. I walked down to the front desk and told the woman someone had been knocking on my door. She stared at me in confusion. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You're the only guest staying here tonight." My stomach dropped. I forced a nervous smile and walked back to my room, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. I locked every bolt on the door and climbed into bed. The room was pitch black. I grabbed my phone to distract myself, and the light from the screen illuminated the corner of the room. Someone was standing there, motionless, silent, watching me. My heart slammed against my ribs. I jumped off the bed and ran for the door. As I fumbled with the locks, I heard footsteps charging toward me from behind. I ripped the door open and sprinted down the hallway. The woman at the desk screamed when she saw me, but then her eyes widened as she looked past me. The man was right behind me. He reached the lobby and suddenly bolted out the front door, disappearing into the darkness. Police arrived shortly after. The cameras barely captured anything useful. Investigators believe he slipped into my room while I was at the front desk asking about the knocking. No one ever figured out who he was or what he wanted. I checked out immediately and drove the rest of the way home without stopping. To this day, I still think about what would have happened if I hadn't gone to the front desk that night.